let's see where we begin. First things first, you wanted to lead with the ethnicity thing, so I'll go there. To me, it's about approachability. And I'm coming at this from a position of white, educated privilege. As you probably know, I'm a classicist and ancient and medieval European historian. And I'm English, grew up in England, grew up in an English school system where you learn things about Romans and about Vikings and stuff like that. So a lot of us in this country, if you're trying to get somebody involved in playing a fantasy game, and you can say, well, it's a bit like Romans against Vikings, or it's a bit like Life of Brian, a famous English comedy troupe, the Pythons, you may have heard of them. Or you say it's a bit like Braveheart, but instead of being a Braveheart against the English, he's against sort of English Romans or something like that. You can get people in. And my own gaming epiphany was in 1992 when I played in my first live-action role-playing game. Now, before then, you'd heard of live-action role-players, and they were people who liked to get wet and muddy and took rubber swords and hit each other around the head in caves or forests. Yeah. And I had friends coaxing me, and when I went to the first Convulsion Con in 1992, it was for an 8-hour Glorantha LARP, and it was set in Boldholm, capital of Sartar. So there were Sartarites, and there were Lunars, there were Tarshides and Grayslanders, there were folk from Parvis, there were townsfolk and temple folk and military folk and rebels and all sorts of folk, and it was all just great fun. And in order to get people up to speed, we came up with some shorthands that we could use to tell somebody who didn't really know what Glorantha was. And we said, oh, don't worry about it. It's a bit like, Romans in Britain or Romans against Vikings or whatever. And these were convenient shorthands. They got people up and running. We never thought it was the whole truth. There's a bit of me that when I see extremely Roman art, like the stuff our great friend, the artist Dario Corallo does. Now, remember, he's an Italian artist. He's about 60 now. He's grown up drawing Romans because, hey, you're an Italian, you're into art and history and stuff. You draw Romans.
What else are you going to draw? Right.
He does them for us, and they're gorgeous. I hope you've seen some of his work. The covers he did for Tales of the Reaching Moon with like lunar centurions with bat standards and moon runes on their helmets and stuff. It was great. And a part of me, when I'd see this thing, would say, shame it's a bit cheesy. If only we could invent the material details of a classical but not derivative civilization from scratch, that would be so much cooler. And then the other part of me said, well, sod it, we're not going to do that. So this is good.
Not only that, but I mean, if you're an artist, you're not going to do it. I mean, that's how it is.
Well, that's one thing where what Jeff is doing with the art direction for RuneQuest makes me very excited, because we now have a lot of good art that you can show people, and that you can show other artists and get them excited to do it. And in particular, breaking out of the it's barbarians hitting each other with big weapons and fighting monsters into the more here's a god, here's a goddess, here's a picture of something that's got iconic
remarkably
meaning.
Clear from all of the Chaosium Inc. effort is incredibly clear in this way, but it's definitely a recent recent phenomenon to have that kind of art direction, that kind of dedication.
You can see the difference between the Moon design books of stuff where they'd scrape together any piece of art they could get. Yeah, it bulks it out. It makes it have a lot of pictures in them. Right. But the contrast between that and what the guide did, and even more so with what the RuneQuest and the Sourcebook have done.
Absolutely.
It's lovely. Great progress. I'm really proud to have funded some of that art. Moocher's Honeyeel is mine. And we're actually paying for one of the Moocher-esque artists Jeff's found to do us a picture of the goddess Glamour for a forthcoming project. We want to see Debbie Harry as the tutelary goddess of ancient Rome. It would be rather nice.
Right. Can you give me a sec to see if I can paraphrase what you said Or
have a
kind
go.
of what I'm hearing?
Feed something back to me, and then
Right.
I will jump back because I went on an artistic diversion while I was talking about getting
Right.
people on board easily.
Well, you know,
What would
it's
you
a
like to
thing where you
paraphrase?
put one finger up in the air and then you look at it later and say, I put it up in the air for a reason. What was I trying to say?
Yeah.
But what I'm
Paraphrase
hearing
back.
is that you actually have kind of two points that rest uneasily to the listener, even if they don't necessarily contradict one another. One is the practicalities, the historical practicalities of getting people to play can't be denied.
Yep.
They can't be denied. You can't finger wag at them from today. Right? You can't say, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Oh, it was a bad idea. There's a
reason why, although I have many friends who would sort of kind of like to play a game in TechUML, we've not done it.
Right.
And that barrier of alienness to us it's a big thing.
Right. So I get that. The pragmatics, we're going to point that out as a reality. On the other hand, if I recall my dive into Brookness over the years, as far as Glorantha is concerned, you also personally celebrate the Mesopotamian and related vibe.
Absolutely.
Right. So, but you see that,
not to the same extent that some do.
Okay. So fair enough.
Shall I do my position statement here?
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is, am I catching that both of these are being stated, and that although they're not necessarily contradictory, they certainly aren't saying the same thing?
Okay. Right. Here's where I come from. The first big thing I worked on with Greg was the Carmanians. I'm very, very happy with where they are today. If you pick up a book that tells you anything useful about Carmanians, you'll look at it and you'll say, oh, look, there's bits of Nick all over this. Right. And that's as it should be. And the way I conceived of the Carmanians was this. At the time, Greg was doing his God Time and Dawn Age Dara Harpens as very Babylonian with a hint of Assyrian. Very, generic Middle Eastern temple city. Blah, 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 blah. They've
got the conical helmets that bend forward at the top. I gotcha.
You got it. Right. That's the ones. And he's doing that. And we all know that the Lunar Empire today is a modern Hellenistic, which was where Greg ended up, or Greco-Roman, or possibly Byzantine come Ottoman, if you go for the more...
slightly, if you want to bump it up a little bit.
You're not going for the technology, but you're going for the feel of it. You're going for the feel of this exoticism and theocracy, which you don't get with the Greeks and the Romans. The Greeks, you've got a sea of gods there, but you don't have the sense that there's somebody calling the shots. There's a state cult behind it all. That there's a Caliph or the emperor who is the equal.
Or if you want to if you want to bump it backward, the Egyptian feel. But yes, go on.
Absolutely. So we know where we're heading towards. We're heading towards something that is more modern than these Babylonians and Assyrians and Hittites. And I, as a bridging position, said, well, okay, let's do the Carmanians then as Persians to the lunar Proto-Greeks. So we've got something that's more modern than the Babylonian Dara Harpens that will take over from them at the end of the Second Age, and then in turn will have the Lunars take them over in the Third Age. So I was seeing it as a historical succession in which I agree, absolutely. The very old stuff is there and is old. And then there's a middle period of stuff that happens in the Second Age, which is not as old. And then there's the modern era, which is more recognizably the kind of stuff we've always been told the Lunars are about. Right. So, regimented, uniformed, with siege equipment, and you know where I'm coming from here. Right. The kind of stuff you saw if you were playing White Bear and Red Moon. So that was my position, and the position I saw Greg getting himself into was, which I thought was unfortunate, and told him so at the time, was that he basically stuck his head in a Dara Harpen bucket for so long that he'd convinced himself the Lunar Empire today, contemporary Lunar Empire, was the Dara Harpen Empire. And it was really hard to work with him when he was doing that.
As I recall from the Hero Wars phase, Dara Hapa was extremely emphasized as effectively you get up north of Tarsh and it's all going to be Dara Hapa all day long.
Yes, that was what went wrong with Hero Wars.
Okay. So now, okay, so that's position
And
statement, or were you still coming up the ramp to go over the wall at Boltholm? I'm not sure which. In terms of what you want to say.
Yeah, there is a more sweeping historical piece to this, and I'll do that because I kind of enjoy it, and it ties things into elements and cultures and how old they feel to us. And the way this one works is that we all know that the oldest cultures are the primeval earth rune cultures of places like Ezrolia and
it's all over
parts
the place.
Of Peloria.
We had a hero quest where different women hero quests all converged.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not alone in saying that that's happened. As soon as you read it, you start drawing the lines, and it's
Absolutely.
all there. There's no.
So you've got this substrate, which I'm going to pin on Earth, as that's the dominant thing you get in Ezrolia and in Peloria, and say that there's an old level of culture that we associate with the Earth. And then on top of that, that's usually taken over by imperial states, and they worship the sun gods,
some aspect of the sky,
and
or
they're building ziggurats, and they've got people in gold hats running them, and they are more modern than the old civilizations. This is like the Persians taking over in Egypt, say.
Or even if you go back and look at the historical record for ancient Greece, that's what you find. You find that the sky god Zeus stuff is actually a classical invention. You go back earlier, and you're going to find earth goddesses. You're going to find Poseidon as an earth god.
This is the Pelagians. If you've read your Robert Graves, this is absolutely what he was mainstreaming on the whole time, and so was I, while drinking and experimenting with stuff. The whole idea that what we're seeing in Heracles is the record of a hero from the north, a Dorian hero coming and smashing up the Hydra cult.
Right.
So you've got snake cults and earth cults and women cults, and you've got big manly sky heroes coming in with their thunderbolts and their lions and smashing the whole thing up.
Yeah, that's Graves' thing. I actually, again, I tend to go. I don't want to quibble. I was just going to say that if you go to what I understand to be the historical records, you find that even Heracles is actually more of a folk earth hero than he is anything to do with thunderbolts. But that's not neither here nor there. Go on.
Anyhow, the thing is, I don't when I get excitable about something Graves says, it's not because I think he's right. It's because I think it's colourful and usable.
Yeah, it's worth. Yeah, go ahead.
So there you've got this next strata is sun cults taking over from Earth Queens. The next strata we know in RuneQuest terms that feels more modern than your old sun cultures is storm cultures, because weirdly enough, they're actually more modern in elemental succession terms. The storm comes after the sun. So now you've got your migration era barbarian folk smashing up your early civilizations. And then on top of that, and more modern still, is the moon.
Oh, absolutely. The lunar situation is a huge swerve right into the middle of all of it. Right.
It feels alien and weird and different. It's made progress. It's got ideas that people haven't had before. And the idea that you could just ignore all that and say, oh, it's just the Dara Harpen's moon son. Well, he's just the 77th Dara Harpen Emperor. Look, he dresses like a Dara Harpen Emperor. Right. His army is a Dara Harpen army. That to me is just so fun avoidant. It really used to wind me up. So, but nowadays it doesn't have to, because I'm a happy man.
Well, you breathe a couple of times and you realize, oh, okay, I already had that argument 20 years ago. I guess I don't have to have it again now.
It's not just that. It's 20 years ago, and we won.
Right.
I feel that there's just one little detail standing in my way, and then our glorious victory will be sealed.
Okay.
And the little detail is this. I think at the moment that RuneQuest Glorantha does a great job of presenting a beautifully consistent sort of Mycenaean Bronze Age vision of Sartar and surrounds. And I still think that the Sartarites were recently conquered and occupied by people who are not from the Mycenaean Bronze Age, who are off up to the north and the west, and they've got some problems of their own, and eventually they may be back. But I think it would be a great mistake to pin the Lunar Empire to the same level of technological sophistication as the Sartorites. That's just where I'm coming from. But thank goodness they're a long way away. They're not in the core rules. We can ignore that. What I'm working on at the moment with my good friends from the Reaching Moon Megacorp days is an expanded, reissued version of the Rough Guide to Glamour. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Well, I remember there was work on it, and I even got some of it from, concerned people involved. Back when I was really playing the hell out of the setting. But
Excellent.
But the fact is that it was always so rough. I mean, it was what I saw.
Oh, you might not.
I never could get a fucking straight answer about what the Dart Wars were. And I'm not asking for an explanation. What I'm saying
I'm not offering one.
If you're not in the working group, looking at the notes isn't really all that helpful.
Oh, this is before working group. This is stuff we finished and published in the 90s.
Okay.
And it is non-canonical, and it is beautiful, and it encompasses some of the best work by myself and my friends Chris Gidlow and Mike Hagan. Mm-hmm. It was a background source book for our 50-player Lunar Freeform, and we'd like to get it out there again. So you get a guide to the monuments of the lunar capital, right. And you get tourist guides on life there, and you get stuff about the imperial cult and what you might want to get up to. I'm chucking a bunch of Michael O'Brien and my old stories in the back of the book because we're never going to get that stuff out anywhere else, and it's great fun. Some of our funniest writing. We're getting Dario Corallo, the cover artist for the Glorantha Classics and several of the best issues of Tales, to do us cover art. He's doing a beautiful Elvis as Moon Sun picture for us. It's lovely stuff. And so we go. And we're working on that at the moment. It'll be out hopefully this year. Hopefully the first half of this year. Right?
Believe me, I know those words well. Go on.
Yeah. But we've got huge encouragement from Michael O'Brien and Jeff Richard and Rick Mines. Huge encouragement and support. They're providing everything we could possibly need. Jeff's writing a few bits for it. Rick has thrown open the Tales of the Reaching Moon archive so that we've got all the original TIFF art of anything that was previously published that we've got the rights to reuse. It's coming along nicely. I'm self-teaching in design. You can laugh at the results when you see them.
Oh, believe me, I know the feeling. You should see me self-teaching in, for example, Discord.
Yay! Oh, but anyhow, that's one of the big things that's making me happy at the moment. And the reason it's making me happy is because we wrote this thing 20 some years ago, and there's been nothing like it since, and nobody's come along with something that makes us think, oh shit, we missed a trick there. If only we'd made it a bit more Hittite. We've just got this vision of a teeming imperial capital with weird cults and weird nobles and stuff going on, and it just feels lovely. It's really been very, very exciting for all of us involved in it to go back to it and pick up what we had done, tweak it here and there, expand it here and there. We're throwing in things that we published in Tales of the Reaching Moon that are entirely copycatic with the original thing. So the Cult of the Red Emperor and pieces about satraps and sultans and the like. And it's all coming together very nicely. Quite pleased with it.
Well, that is
but the point
great,
is,
yes.
We've got John Wick as a visiting tourist, just pottering around, kicking the scenery and seeing what he sees. And he's working on lunar things with Jeff and Rick, and is in our group at their invitation, having a look at what's going on. So it's all rather good fun. But yeah. And meanwhile, if you look at what Chaosium themselves say is or isn't reliable as canon sources, they elide the Isseries period. Their advice, generally speaking, would be, oh, I wouldn't buy one of those old Imperial Lunar Handbook books. They're not right. They're going to mislead you. You're going to be making mistakes. And when Jeff was writing the guide and kibitzing with me on it, one of his goals was to wind back from the weird, the Lunar Empire as a hodgepodge of weird ancient cultures that had nothing in common, and towards the way we see it as people who came into Glorantha through the likes of the lunar history, the history of the Lunar Empire. So instead of saying, well, here's some people who've lived in a swamp for
When you say the history
forever,
of the Lunar Empire, are you talking about the articles that are from the worms
the
footprints?
seven Wayne histories, the history of the Lunar
one-
Empire, Zero Wayne, First Wayne, Second Wayne, all that stuff. It's all collected now and expanded and beautiful and illustrated and mapped in the Glorantha source book. But back in the day, this was originally run in Worm's footnotes, beautifully reissued.